Hi, peace lovers. It's December, and I'm still practicing my Kidio compost voice. For these last couple of weeks of the year, I've gathered 17 holiday inspired public domain readings from writers like L. Frank Baum, Henry David Thoreau, and Charles Dickens. It's a bit quirky, I know, but so is Kitty, and so is the new Peace podcast series arriving right here on New Year's Day, the Peace Experiments, Experiment Zero. A humming government facility, a skeptical fact-checking goat, and a classroom full of teens collide when reporter Kitty Ocampos begins investigating the myths that keep peace just out of reach. The peace experiments explore what happens when young people finally ask the questions adults avoid. And perhaps you've been hearing the Next Peacelands here on the podcast. We'll be returning soon to the practice of holding peaceful intention for the specific war zones and the countries that supply weapons to them. But during this stretch of Kitty Reed's Holiday Lit for Peace, the Next Peacelands will simply offer the names of some of the spiritual organizations working quietly and steadily for peace. You can add your own peace intentions to their hopeful rivers of peace if you choose to stay through the end of this episode. As always, the creative books and projects I make for peace can be found at aviskalfsbeek.com, and the music for the Next Peacelands comes from the talented Javier Peque Rodriguez. Joy and peace to you and yours, and to the world. Now over to Kitty. Today's reading comes from L. Frank Baum. Yes, sir, the very same fellow who later wrote The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, though this little piece came earlier when he was experimenting with how stories shape the moral imagination of children. Baum was one of those American writers who believed plain storytelling could carry a lesson without preaching, the sort of man who noticed how a good tale can slip a bit of decency into a household faster than any sermon could. A Kidnapped Santa Claus is a curious, lively story published in 1904, back when the United States was changing fast and folks were learning to worry about both industrial noise and the shadows it cast across family life. In this tale, Baum imagined Santa not as a jolly decoration, but as a working figure whose generosity runs straight into the forces of jealousy, malice, and plain old human meanness. It's a story about what happens when goodwill gets interrupted and how determined the world has to be if it wants kindness to keep moving. We'll read just a little today, enough to catch Baum's steady hand and the way he used fantasy not to escape the world, but to reflect it. Even in a children's tale, he's asking a sober question: what does it take to protect the world of joy? Well, honey, I could read the label off a can of condensed milk or a note shoved into a winter coat pocket. Sometimes the quietest words make the widest road for peace, especially when nobody, for goodness sake, is holding a gosh darn gun. Following is an excerpt from A Kidnapped Santa Claus by L. Frank Baum. Dear listeners, please know that I live in a small town, and on this day they are rotating the fire engine truck, so my apologies for any background noise. Youth 1. Burzy. Have you heard of the great forest of Burzy? Nurse used to sing of it when I was a child. She sang of the big tree trunks standing close together with their roots intertwining below the earth and their branches intertwining above it, of their rough coating of bark and queer gnarled limbs, of the bushy foliage that roofed the entire forest, save where the sunbeams found a path through which to touch the ground in little spots and to cast weird and curious shadows over the mosses, the lichens, and the drifts of dried leaves. The forest of Burzy is mighty and grand and awesome to those who steal beneath its shade. Coming from the sunlit meadows into its mazes, it seems at first gloomy, then pleasant, and afterward filled with never-ending delights. For hundreds of years it has flourished in all its magnificence, the silence of its enclosure unbroken save by the chirp of busy chipmunks, the growl of wild beasts, and the songs of birds. Yet Bursey has its inhabitants. For all this, nature peopled in the beginning with fairies, nooks, reals, and nymphs. As long as the forest stands, it will be a home, a refuge, and a playground to these sweet immortals who revel undisturbed in its depths. Civilization has never yet reached Bursey. Will it ever, I wonder? 2. The Child of the Forest. Once, so long ago our great-grandfathers could scarcely have heard it mentioned, there lived within the great forest of Bursey a wood-nymph named Nesile. She was closely related to the mighty Queen Zurline, and her home was beneath the shade of a wide-spreading oak. Once every year on budding day, when the trees put forth the new buds, Nesile held the golden chalice of Ac to the lips of the queen, who drank therefrom to the prosperity of the forest. So you see, she was a nymph of some importance, and moreover, it is said she was highly regarded because of her beauty and grace. When she was created, she could not have told. Queen Zurline could not have told. The great Ac himself could not have told. It was long ago when the world was new and nymphs were needed to guard the forests and to minister to the wants of the young trees. Then, on some day not remembered, Nesile sprang into being, radiant, lovely, straight and slim as the sapling she was created to guard. Her hair was the color that lines a chestnut burr. Her eyes were blue in the sunlight and purple in the shade. Her cheeks bloomed with the faint pink that edges the clouds at sunset. Her lips were full red, pouting and sweet. For costume she adopted oak leaf green. All the wood nymphs dress in that color, and know no other so desirable. Her dainty feet were sandal-clad, while her head remained bare of covering other than her silken tresses. Nesile's duties were few and simple. She kept hurtful weeds from growing beneath her trees and sapping the earth food required by her charges. She frightened away the gadgulls who took evil delight in flying against the tree trunks and wounded them so that they drooped and died from the poisonous contact. In dry season she carried water from the brooks and pools and moistened the roots of her thirsty dependents. That was in the beginning. The weeds had now learned to avoid the forest where wood nymphs dwelt. The loathsome gadgulls no longer dared come nigh. The trees had become old and sturdy and could bear the drought better than when fresh sprouted, so Nesile's duties were lessened, and time grew laggard, while succeeding years became more tiresome and uneventful than the nymph's joyous spirit loved. Truly the forest dwellers did not lack amusement. Each full moon they danced in the royal circle of the queen. There were also the Feast of Nuts, the Jubilee of Autumn Tintings, the solemn ceremony of leaf shedding, and the revelry of Budding Day. But these periods of enjoyment were far apart and left many weary hours between. That a wood nymph should grow discontented was not thought of by Nesile's sisters. It came upon her only after many years of brooding. But when once she had settled in her mind that life was irksome, she had no patience with her condition, and longed to do something of real interest and to pass her days in ways hitherto undreamed of by forest nymphs. The law of the forest alone restrained her from going forth in search of adventure. While this mood lay heavy upon pretty Nesile, it chanced that the great Ac visited the forest of Bursey, and allowed the wood nymphs, as was their wont, to lie at his feet and listen to the words of wisdom that fell from his lips. Ac, the master woodsman of the world, he sees everything and knows more than the sons of men. That night he held the queen's hand, for he loved the nymphs as a father loves his children, and Nesile lay at his feet with many of her sisters and earnestly hearkened as he spoke. "We live so happily, my fair ones, in our forest glades," said Ak, stroking his grizzled beard thoughtfully, "that we know nothing of the sorrow and misery that fall to the lot of those poor mortals who inhabit the open spaces of the earth. They are not of our race, it's true, yet compassion well befits beings so fairly favored as ourselves. Often as I pass by the dwelling of some suffering mortal, I am tempted to stop and banish the poor thing's misery. Yet suffering in moderation is the natural lot of mortals, and it is not our place to interfere with the laws of nature." "Nevertheless," said the fair queen, nodding her golden head at the master woodsman, "it would not be a vain guess that Ak has often assisted these hapless mortals." Ak smiled. "Sometimes," he replied, "when they are very young. Children, the mortals call them, I have stopped to rescue them from misery. The men and women I dare not interfere with. They must bear the burdens nature has imposed upon them. But the helpless infants, the innocent children of men, have a right to be happy until they become full grown and able to bear the rituals of humanity. So I feel I am justified in assisting them. Not long ago, a year maybe, I found 4 poor children huddled in a wooden hut, slowly freezing to death. Their parents had gone to a neighboring village for food and had left a fire to warm their little ones while they were absent. But a storm arose and drifted the snow in their path, so they were long on the road. Meantime the fire went out, and the frost crept into the bones of the waiting children." "Poor things," murmured the queen softly, "what did you do?" "I called Nelko, bidding him fetch wood from my forest and breathe upon it until the fire blazed again, warmed the little room where the children lay. Then they ceased shivering and fell asleep until their parents came." "I am glad you did this," said the good queen, beaming upon the master, and Nasir, who had eagerly listened to every word, echoed in a whisper, "I too am glad." Thank you for listening and allowing me to practice Kitty's reporting voice for the big story ahead. Now stay with me a few minutes longer if you're able for the next Peacelands. Following is a special holiday edition of the Next Peacelands, where we pause on listing the war zones and weapons suppliers. Instead, we rest our intention of peace on a few of the spiritual organizations working tirelessly toward peace. While this list is far from comprehensive, the total number of organizations, large and small, would number in the thousands if we included all who work daily for peace. I ask that you consider taking this time to add your own intention of peace to those working daily toward that goal. Mennonite Central Committee. Peace is here. Community of Santa Hidio. Peace is here. The Network for Religious and Traditional Peacemakers. Peace is here. Religions for Peace. Peace is here. Pax Christi International. Peace is here. American Friends Service Committee. Peace is here. Lutheran Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. The International Fellowship of Reconciliation. Peace is here. Baptist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Community Peacemaker Teams. Peace is here. Episcopal Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Friends Peace Teams. Peace is here. Muslim Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Buddhist Peace Fellowship, peace is here. Quaker Peace and Social Witness, peace is here. Network of Christian Peace Organizations, peace is here. Network of Spiritual Progressives, peace is here. United Religions Initiative, peace is here. The Christian Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, peace is here. Agape International Spiritual Center, peace is here.